Joined by Mpho Tjope, who heads the I Can Be campaign, which seeks to reduce the high number of learners dropping out of school and attempting suicide. The campaign is happening in Johannesburg, then Pretoria, and then in Durban. Thando Hopa is a South African model, activist, and lawyer. She's the first woman with albinism to be on the cover of Vogue. While working as a prosecutor, she was scouted by Johan to work as a model. Hopa aims to portray albinism in a positive way. Both Mpho Tjope and Thando Hopa join me in studio now. A very good morning to you, and thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you.
Now, Mpho, I think I'll begin with you. I mean, I was handed this book a few weeks ago, which I got the honor of reading. Life with Albinism, filled with pearls. You tell a story of, a young black South African couple who are expecting a child during the apartheid era, living in a mine area. Tell us more about this book.
Yeah, well, this book was designed to go through challenges with albinism from one space, from parents to education to even varsity, but also positivities that comes along, because I think mostly we always highlight only the pain that with albinism, but not necessarily when people graduate, when people do business and so forth. With albinism, that's it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And tell us a bit about the I Can Be campaign. What does it aim to do, and why exactly was it established?
I came with it because I saw that many learners with albinism were dropping out of school and some committing suicide. But I believe it was because of the narrative that is always portrayed maybe in media and also in many aspects, where it's only focusing on the sad stories. And what happens is that when you are a child with albinism and you are in school, what happens is that you don't necessarily gain confidence in that, okay, I can also be a doctor, I can be a lawyer, I can be an engineer. So what happens is that I bring engineers, I bring lawyers, doctors, and people who have made it in a way with albinism to come and speak to learners with albinism, to the challenges at school, but also not necessarily only challenges from school from their view, but we ask learners, like, what are the challenges in your community? What are the challenges in your school? And what do you think is the solution? So what happens is that we try to address challenges of dropping out. We also address communities, because in schools that these learners are studying in, we go and speak so that we change or we educate even teachers about albinism and communities. But most importantly, to give views of positivities, that regardless of what challenges are happening, there are positivities out there, and you can become whatever that you desire to be.
Absolutely. And I mean, Thando, he's speaking about how, they're trying to move away from stories of albinism being such a sad story. And your bio and your story definitely is not a sad story. In fact, if anything, it's so inspirational. And I mean, not just for a young person who's living with albinism, but for a young South African who just has daily challenges.
Thank you. I think what is quite important about what Mpho is doing is that the thing about repetitive stories is that they tend to create stereotypes. And then you yourself as a person and the community around you cannot imagine your humanity outside of the story. And I think it is important, by using something like representation, because that's what literature is, it's representation, to kind of negotiate a broader narrative about a particular life in a particular body. And I think with respect to my work, I've also really noticed the importance of representation, but I've used media and modeling and fashion and beauty as a platform. So I guess we're all just trying to use all the mediums that we can to kind of negotiate a better narrative for anybody who's got albinism, but also particularly for the future generation.
Sure. And I understand that there's big work that you're doing next year as well. Tell us a bit about that.
So I am now a fellow at the World Economic Forum, and I was appointed as a cultural leader for the Narratives Lab. So that's going to be quite exciting, because I think, we are in an age where we're trying to understand concepts of diversity and inclusion, and we're also trying to bring them in through storytelling, but also through policies, to understand how to go about more inclusive work environments, more inclusive societies, and more inclusive media representation.
Yeah. And Mpho, I mean, with this campaign, just reading up on it, you know, there's some crucial things that you're offering to young people as well. I mean, things like sunscreen, things like, you know, hats that people who are living with albinism really need. And you speak about how, you know, without these things, it actually even perpetuates the number of young people that you see dropping out from school because they are facing these daily challenges and they just don't have access to all these essential products.
Yeah, I mean, if without glasses, we struggle to see. So now, can you imagine if somebody does not have glasses? What happens is that they are then labeled as slow learners, while the issue is not maybe necessarily about the mindset, but it's about the person cannot necessarily see at the board. Or if you have to walk, some people walk 2 kilometers to school. So if that is the case and you are exposed to the sun, then what happens is that you'd have blisters and have everything else, then it perpetuates the whole thing. Then you leave school, or sometimes it could be also challenges of being teased or bullied at school. So what we do is we then speak at that school and we educate teachers that sometimes you print in a font that is bigger, then a person can actually read better. Instead of, let's say, sometimes we share books, 5 people in one book, then that person cannot really see properly. So instead what you need to do is just those little things that makes a whole lot of difference in our space, yeah.
And just as we wrap up this conversation, I mean, as this campaign moves from province to province throughout the country, what do you hope you'll be able to achieve?
What we are hoping to do is to get even more people with albinism participating who are professionals. We are able to, or we are looking at ensuring that learners stay in school, that they progress. I mean, we had learners who participated in last year's event. They are now in adversity. So that is progress. And we are also looking at companies that have offer bursaries and to actually come through and say, look, for your learners, here are our bursaries, because it's not necessarily about that people with albinism cannot do anything, because clearly there's a range of different people who participate, and like Thando is even able to show that with albinism, with support and family, we can actually do anything that we desire.
Absolutely. No boundaries. No. At all. Well, thank you so much for joining me. That is Mpho Tjope and Thando Hopa speaking to us about the hashtag #ICanBe campaign.